Today, I notified the Prime Minister that I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement. Canadians are fighting a battle.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh making a bombshell announcement. The NDP walking away from the supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals. That deal that was supposed to keep the Liberal minority government in power until June 2025, right before an October federal election. Under the deal, the NDP would support the government on budgets and confidence votes, and the Liberals would work with them to deliver on some key policy areas. Now, we've seen them make progress on many files, passing anti-scab legislation and a sustainable jobs bill. They introduced a national childcare program. They've also made moves on dental care and the beginning of a national pharmacare program. But now, that deal is done.
I really hope the NDP stays focused on how we can deliver for Canadians, as we have over the past years, rather than focusing on politics.
Now, this does not mean an election is imminent, but it does mean the Liberals' ability to function as a de facto majority is over. Everything is now vote by vote, issue by issue, meaning the Liberal government could fall at any time. Liberal Government House Leader Karina Gould joins us now. Minister Gould, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Look, it was just a week ago. You were saying you were confident the supply and confidence agreement would last until June, that it was a strong agreement, and now it's dead. What happened, in your view?
Oh, it's a great question. I'm definitely surprised about it. I mean, the only thing that I can see is that Mr. Singh decided to put his own personal political interest ahead of that of Canadians, because there were no signs really in the relationship that the NDP was going to do this. It came as a big surprise to all of us today. And so really, Mr. Singh has just decided that this is better for him politically, and he's putting at risk all of the successful programs that we have put in place over the last 3 years.
I know you were away on maternity leave for a significant amount of the last little while, but I know you would have regular conversations with the House Leader and others. Were you given any indication, or was anybody in any of the committees that manage the supply and confidence agreement given any indication that this was a possibility this soon?
No, we were definitely operating under the notion that this was going to last. I mean, there was always an escape valve, if you will, or an exit if either party decided that they didn't want to continue. But I think what was unique about the supply and confidence agreement is that it was an agreement to pursue the things that we mutually shared as objectives for Canadians and delivering for Canadians. And there was always space to disagree and distinguish ourselves on policies that weren't contemplated within the supply and confidence agreement. So this is if I'm being honest, I think it's a bit of an odd move from the NDP because, as Mr. Singh said in his video today, I've been more successful than I could have ever imagined. So now it's time to stop being successful. It doesn't really make sense in the view that we've been able to deliver really good things for Canadians. So now the NDP is like, oh, better stop that because we think our political fortunes would be better if we were separate. So more than anything, I think it's an unfortunate moment that the NDP has decided to, put their own self-interest ahead of the broader interest of Canadians.
Well, but in the video, Mr. Singh also says the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests, and that you can't beat the Conservatives. So how do you respond to those allegations?
Well, I mean, coming from someone who just last week, Mr. Poilievre said it's time to end the agreement with the Liberals, and 1 week later, Mr. Singh says, okay, Mr. Poilievre, I'll do exactly what you asked of me. I don't know, seems...
Well, this has been in the works for a while. I mean, they shot that video a while back, clearly. This wasn't something that was done.
Do we know that, though?
Well,
that's what they're saying.
He's in Toronto right now, and that video appears to have been shot in Ottawa and was put together. So I don't know. It's not, but it seems like this is not the sort of thing. I don't think Jagmeet Singh made this decision because Pierre Poilievre said it. But he said a lot of things about your government here: too weak, too selfish, too beholden to corporate interests. I mean, what message does that send to Canadians that the partner you've been governing with for the last little while says that about your government and the Prime Minister?
Well, look, I mean, right now, Mr. Singh is trying to distinguish himself. This whole decision is about Mr. Singh's own political fortunes. It doesn't have to do with anything that we've done over the past 3 years, because in the video, he talks about how successful he's been. And we've worked really well together to be able to deliver things like dental care. We're working on pharmacare. We're working on a whole range of issues that are beneficial to Canadians. So, I mean, this is really a video about Mr. Singh. It's not so much about us. And, I have to say that I don't think it looks very strong on his part to be doing this right now, but that's his decision, right? And, our job now, and my job as the government House Leader, is to go forward with the minority parliament and see what we're going to work on. And I mean, he even said in his press release that, they're going to take this on a vote by vote, case by case basis. So I think there's still going to be opportunities for us to work with the NDP to advance areas of common interest. We're going to be open to working with the Bloc and maybe even the Conservatives, because sometimes, interests align, and we'll make sure that everything that we do as the Liberal government, as Liberal members of Parliament, is squarely focused on serving and fighting for Canadians.
I would be very intrigued to see what issue you and the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives can find alignment on, Minister. But you say this is about Jagmeet Singh's political interest, but it also affects the Liberal political interest significantly. You were supposed to get 4 budgets out of this. That 4th budget now seems highly unlikely with this move, or certainly more fraught. Time was a key thing Liberals kept pointing to, that you have a year until the next election, things could change. That time is now shortened or also less certain. So what does this do for your ability as a government to turn around your political fortunes?
Well, as I said, now we're kind of back to minority parliaments as usual. So the supply and confidence agreement, while unique at the federal level in Canada, I mean, it's not something that we've seen federally before. So now it's really about going back to a minority parliament and seeing how we can work with other parties, and I think our job is to really demonstrate to Canadians what we care about, and that is delivering for Canadians. And so it's about ensuring that Canadians see the work that we're doing, and continuing in that vein. So does this change things a little bit? But at the same time, it just means that, the work that I have to do over the next couple of weeks is a bit more interesting, maybe a bit more challenging, but I still think that, we can continue to govern effectively for Canadians.
You can govern effectively, but can you campaign? Can you do the political element of your job? If you're going to be facing confidence votes without a partner, and the Conservatives have been effective in forcing this onto the agenda, you're going to be leashed to Parliament. People are going to need to stay near the House of Commons because you're going to need all of your votes. You can't count on the NDP. So it limits your ability to really campaign over the next year until the next election, whenever it may be now.
Well, I mean, our job right now is to govern. That is our job as the government. And so that's what we are going to do. And it's certainly going to make for an interesting fall. I was already thinking this was going to be an interesting fall, but, we'll find areas of common ground, I'm sure, with the NDP, with the Bloc. You're right, it might be a bit harder with the Conservatives. But I think what's important is that Canadians see that members of Parliament continue to work for them and put their interests first. Unfortunately, what we see with the Conservatives, particularly under Pierre Poilievre's leadership, is that this is all about Pierre Poilievre and his political interests. And now, unfortunately, Mr. Singh has decided to go in that direction as well. And we will just continue to demonstrate to Canadians that we are the party that puts them first.
Is there any path for the election to still be in October 25? It feels like this inevitably moves it forward. This accelerates the timeline to the next campaign, shortens the runway that you have available to you as a government.
Well, I don't know about that because, there have been minority parliaments before where there haven't been supply and confidence agreements, and there have been, they haven't all immediately gone to an election. So we're going to take it one day at a time. We're going to have to work hard, negotiate with the other parties. But at the end of the day, it's about delivering for Canadians, and that's what we need to make sure that we're squarely focused on.
But how do you explain to Canadians the fact that Mr. Singh, and I know you say this is in his own political interest that he's doing this, too weak, too selfish, too beholden to corporate interests. This is what he's saying after working side by side with your government since March of 2022, that this is now the conclusions that he is drawing and broadcasting to the Canadian public.
As I said, I think it's a bit rich for him to say that after, in the same video, he talks about how successful he's been working with us on delivering things for Canadians. So, I think anybody who watches that video can clearly see that this is about him and it's not actually about our government. I think the NDP is facing some very strong political wins. They are succumbing to some of the pressure that Pierre Poilievre is putting on them. And I think it actually demonstrates that they are more nervous about their own political fortunes. And that's why Mr. Singh is doing this right now. Because if he was really focused on delivering for Canadians, we would be continuing to work together to deliver on those programs that are meaningful to Canadians. So, as I said, this is about Mr. Singh. This is about his political objectives and his political interests, and it's not about Canadians. And I think that it's odd timing. I think the messaging is odd, but at the end of the day, that is his decision,
Right.
and he can be focused on himself, and we will keep staying focused on Canadians.
Was the whole thing a mistake? I mean, he's leaving this early. He is throwing significant criticism at the government on the way out the door. And despite delivering on the policy promises that the Prime Minister made to Mr. Singh when they signed this agreement, they are down in the polls. You are down in the polls. Not that everything is about polls, but that is the political reality with less than about a year to an election. I mean, was it a mistake to do this deal? Because it doesn't seem to have worked out for either party politically.
Well, look, I mean, David, our objective as a government and as Liberals is actually to deliver for Canadians. And I would say that what we have been able to do for the last 3 years is provide stability at a time of significant instability around the world. Remember, coming out of COVID, the war in Ukraine, global inflation. There's a lot going on. I think the last thing Canadians needed over the past 3 years was instability. And so that was something that was really important. And then we've been able to deliver very significant policies that are having a major impact on the lives of Canadians. Childcare, for example. And even though that was not part of SACA, that was made possible because we had the stability over the past 3 years in Parliament without having to worry about going to an election or going to an election. And then most recently, I would point to dental care and pharmacare. I think those are really important policies that we've been able to deliver. And I know when I talk to Canadians how meaningful, particularly dental care, has been for our Canadian seniors. Now, all of those things are at risk with this move by Mr. Singh, who thinks that he's positioning himself, but really, I mean, he's just responding to Mr. Poilievre's demands. And so, even if he filmed it beforehand, politics is an art; it's not a science. Just because you have a plan, you have to be able to adapt to it. And I think right now, it just looks like he feels the pressure from Mr. Poilievre. And so to be able to say, I'm going to stand up to him, but I'm going to capitulate as soon as possible, just seems really strange. Okay, well, it seems like you're going to have to adapt as well. We're out of time. Karina Gould, Government House Leader, I want to thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks, David. Good to talk to you. All right, we're going to turn now to the president of the New Democratic Party, Mary Shortall. To note, we did request to speak to NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, but he's not available today. May join us tomorrow. But Mary Shortall, it's good to speak with you again. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Why now? What, from the NDP perspective, has changed with the supply and confidence agreement that, despite the success on all the programs at the center of it, it's time to tear it up?
Well, David, I mean, just look at Canadians and working people today. They're falling further and further behind. They're struggling with the rising costs of everything, groceries, gas, shelter, everything. And there's so much more that could have been done. I think with the supply and confidence agreement, there has been lots done. There's been lots of things that have helped working people, but it hasn't been stuff that the Liberals welcomed without kicking and screaming all the way. They're not issues that the Conservatives support. They're issues that have been voted against time and time again. And there's so much else that can be done, but each time the Liberals are not doing what they should be doing. There's a lot more they
like
can
what?
do.
I mean, how does tearing up the supply and confidence agreement deal with the affordability issues you outlined? Like, how does this make life easier for Canadians?
Because they're not dealing with the affordability issues, and they're not doing the stuff they can do. People have lost trust in them. People are angry. People are losing hope. And they're looking for solutions, and they've lost that trust with the Liberals. They're not going to get it with the Conservatives. And the approach that the NDP had taken in the supply and confidence agreement delivered a lot of those programs that you were just talking about, like pharmacare, dental care, more workers' rights.
But a lot of those aren't all the way. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mary.
No, I was just going to say, David, at this time, now the NDP can concentrate on the issues that matter to people and the solutions that they have. And Jagmeet said very clearly he's running to be Prime Minister. The choice will be between the Conservatives and the NDP.
But, you know, dentistry is not all the way done. Pharmacare is not all the way done. You say you want to do things to help ordinary working Canadians, and I get that, but there's one more budget that was supposed to be in this agreement. The budget's where you get the programs that help Canadians, and now you may or may not be able to influence that because they could use that to launch the election. The Liberals could find common ground with the Bloc Québécois. You've removed yourself from the governance table here if the policy objectives are the goal.
I mean, I disagree with that with respect, because I think we have supported those. Pharmacare and dental care have been issues that the NDP have supported, and it's been their vision that came to that agreement. And it's because of the push from the NDP that the Liberal government actually did what they did, even though they're claiming ownership of it. It really was issues that they did not support until the supply and confidence agreement. They've been promising pharmacare for 30 years. I think the NDP has done their job. If the Liberals wanted to implement it, they would have done it by now. And I think that if they really believe that this is a good program for Canadians and for the people, that they will see that through to the end. If not, I think Canadians know that an NDP government is pretty serious about making sure that we have a pharmacare and a dental care program.
Well, there is pushback from provincial governments on pharmacare too, so that is an obstacle beyond the willingness or reluctance of the government. But I wonder, you know, Mary Shortall, you just heard Karina Gould, and she said this is about Jagmeet Singh's personal political interests. There has been a complaint and a criticism that the confidence and supply agreement has tied the Liberals and the NDP too closely together. Your party can't brand itself as the change option in an election, and the Liberals have been claiming credit for all the good things that have come out of it. So there's a political motivation here, as Karina Gould says? Would you agree to differentiate yourself from Justin Trudeau and his Liberals in the run-up to the election?
I mean, I think the role of the balance of power party in a minority government is to work with that government and to make sure you can get whatever you can for the people who you serve. And that has happened over decades and decades and decades of minority governments. This one was a little bit different. The approach was different in this supply and confidence agreement, but there was an awful lot that was gotten during that period of time, and it benefited the Canadians. I believe very sincerely that Jagmeet Singh understands that the issues of affordability, the other issues about holding the very rich corporations to account and the elite, and to stop the price gouging and all that, are solutions that the NDP have been very vocal on for a long time. And those are the solutions that they will be campaigning on whenever the election will be called.
Well, you can call that election. This is what Pierre Poilievre has been saying, certainly in his response to this today. You just have to vote against the government on a confidence vote, which is something Jagmeet Singh and his caucus would not do under the supply and confidence agreement. With everything Jagmeet Singh said today, they're too weak, they are too selfish, too beholden to corporate interests. Can you vote for the Liberals in a confidence motion with language like that hanging out there?
I think it'll have to be issue by issue, and I believe very firmly that decision, when Jagmeet and the NDP caucus are voting, will be based on what's good for Canadians. This is not about propping up Jagmeet to run, to force an election. This will be vote by vote. They always had the ability to vote no or yes in a minority government. They will continue to do that.
I asked the same question to Karina Gould, Mary Shortall, about whether or not the whole thing was a mistake. Because even though you've made progress on policy and dental care and these things, Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau, neither one of them is doing very well with Canadian voters right now. If you look at public opinion polls, and this has been persistent for quite some time, Pierre Poilievre is on track to win possibly a historic majority. Was it a mistake to do this agreement? Because nobody's gotten a bounce from it.
I think the issues that have been dealt with, like pharmacare, dental care, anti-scab legislation, doubling the GST rebate, all those things that have happened during the supply and confidence agreement have been really beneficial for Canadians. They have put money back in the pockets of Canadians who really need it, because even people who weren't struggling beforehand now are making decisions based on the rising cost of living and stuff. So I do think that those things have been very beneficial to people. It has done its job, and I think that now there's other issues that need to be talked about and dealt with around affordability. And I think that those are the issues where the Liberals have not been strong at all. In fact, they've sided with the corporations around demands to do something about price gouging, especially with the supermarket chains, but with big corporations as well, right. taxing and stuff. They have not made those decisions. So they have not made those decisions in the best interest. At some point, that supply agreement had to finish.
Right. But what specifically is it from a policy perspective, Mary Shortall, you think they should have done to deal with food prices? I mean, look, I don't like my grocery bill any more than any other Canadian with the increases, but a lot of it is climate change, it's the war in Ukraine, it was the post-COVID supply chains. A lot of that is just sort of beyond government policy control. So what specifically is it that wasn't done that could have made a basket of groceries that much cheaper right now?
There have been lots of suggestions put forth by Jagmeet Singh about ways to deal with those issues around price capping, around taxing extraordinary profits from the corporations, about dealing with those issues. And those issues were never done because realistically, we know that the Conservatives have always sided with the corporations, that they will in fact cut a lot of the things that are going to cause more hardship for working families in this country if they get elected. But the Liberals have not done the things that could have been beneficial to make sure that we weathered this inflationary ride a little bit better.
Okay, so Mary Shortall, when I came into work today, I was anticipating a federal election in October of 2025. When I go home tonight, what should I be thinking? I mean, you obviously, Jagmeet Singh didn't speak to reporters today. It was just things done on social media. He's going to do some media tomorrow and have a press conference, as I understand it. Do you think a fourth budget can be passed in the spring? Do you think we're headed to an election in the spring, in the winter, or do you think this can last until October of 2025, even with your party pulling the plug on this agreement today?
I think it'll still be an issue by issue discussion, and if there's non-confidence votes that are held, it will be on the issue. And again, Jagmeet has said many times, and I believe solidly that those decisions will not be based on wanting to call an election or any selfish reasons. They will be based on what's best for the Canadian working people.
But just as a final question, I guess, when he says in his video, they're too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests, that speaks to the very fundamental character of the people running the country. After this move today, how can Jagmeet Singh credibly vote to support and keep this government in power when he has litigated that they are so fundamentally flawed?
But if the Liberals are putting forth issues that will benefit Canadian people, then the government or the NDP will actually vote based on whether or not that's going to benefit the people. The Liberals have the power in government to put forth those pieces of legislation. Jagmeet has said very clearly that he will vote, or they will vote as a party, on an issue-by-issues basis. Mm-hmm. Voters don't have to choose just between the Liberal and the Conservatives in an election. But they do have, but there is issues that come up from time to time where they will still be supporting the government. That would happen with or without a supply and confidence agreement. So right. Nothing changes in that way. There's still the balance of power in a minority government, and they will hold the government's feet to the fire, and they will vote accordingly to what benefits the majority of Canadians.
Mary Shortall, I was not expecting to speak to you today, but I'm glad we got to talk. I want to thank you very much as federal NDP
glad
President.
We did too.
Mary Shortall, thank you so much.
Thanks, David. Bye.
You no longer have the support of the NDP. Your party is trailing in the polls, and the Conservatives are calling for an election. Is it time to send Canadians to the polls?
We're here today because we're delivering on school lunches and school food. I really hope the NDP stays focused on how we can deliver for Canadians, as we have over the past years, rather than focusing on politics.
Might want to focus on politics given what happened today, because Canadians could be facing an election earlier than expected, as today the NDP tore up its supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals, a deal that has kept the minority Liberal government very securely in power. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made the announcement in this video today.
The fact is, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. They cannot be the change. They cannot restore the hope. They cannot stop the Conservatives, but we can.
So there's a campaign pitch, but Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is challenging Singh to try and stop him. Speaking in British Columbia, Poilievre called on the NDP to help force an election.
If you're serious about ending your costly carbon tax coalition with Trudeau, then commit today to voting for a carbon tax election at the earliest confidence vote in the House of Commons.
Okay, there's a lot to talk about with the Power Panel. We're going to bring them in now. Rob Benzie is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communications strategist. Brad Levine is a former communications director for the NDP. We want to hear from him. And here with me, Tim Powers is a former strategist for Conservative parties. Okay, Brad, why now? If you're getting everything you wanted, why rip it up?
Well, I think this is the exact right time. And we've talked about this on another day's Power Panel a handful of months ago by saying that you can't go with the confidence and supply agreement right up until the election campaign. And many of the things, if not all of them, have been launched. All of the policy demands that the NDP have put on this Liberal government are well underway. Quick roll call. 9 million Canadians will be getting dental care. That's launched. 9 million women in Canada will be getting free birth control. 3.7 million diabetics will be getting free insulin. These major initiatives have been launched. Now, we are 2 weeks away from the fall sitting of Parliament, and we are approximately a year and a bit away from the scheduled time of the next federal election campaign. Now, obviously, the federal election can come earlier than that, but there needed to be a time when the New Democratic Party delinked itself from a very unpopular Liberal government. Yet they had to balance the need to get those issues that they wanted to see in the supply agreement through, and then delinking it so that they can pivot, and so they can now start attacking the real, one of the big threats that's happening, and that, of course, is Pierre Poilievre. And you can't do that within the confidence and supply agreement. There's still opportunities to get good things done, and that'll be done on a case-by-case basis, as so many good things in minority parliaments have been dealt with. But now, Trudeau cannot rely on the NDP in a confidence and supply arrangement to get those things done. And in fact, I would submit that the bargaining power of the NDP has gone up, because now there's no agreement that attaches the NDP to the Liberals. So I think that it's a perfect timing to pivot and move away from the Liberals and now start focusing on the Conservatives.
But just to follow up on that, you're saying the Liberals did everything they were supposed to do, so now the NDP, there's no need for them to live up to their end of the bargain, which is support the fourth budget and keep this going until June of 2025. If an employer did that to a union, you guys would be going nuts.
The major initiatives that were contained within the confidence supply agreement have all been launched. I mean, pharmacare is in the Senate.
Except the fourth budget, right? It's the whole agreement is the whole agreement, right? And they're sort of pulling out of it early, right?
And sometimes when one party is not holding up, things. If you talk to the folks that are working through this on a day-to-day basis, Liberals are slow to react. It's like dragging them to the table each and every time. They refuse to act on some key priorities. Long-term care is one of them. So CASA, I would say, on the balance, has been a big success. Let's not forget anti-scab legislation, which is also part of the original deal. But there comes a time when you have to look at your agreement partner and say, are you acting in good faith? Are you moving at the speed and at the direction and the spirit of the supply and confidence agreement? And listen, the agreement allows for either party to step away from it. And the NDP, they've talked about it at the caucus level. They've been listening to their constituents, and they said this is the time to delink ourselves from the confidence supply agreement.
I want to get Amanda in here. Amanda, I mean, what do you make of this move? It wasn't just ending the agreement early because everything can be done and we need to pivot. It was saying the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, too beholden to corporate interests. They can't beat the Conservatives. I mean, what do you make of where this leaves your crowd?
Well, first of all, Brad. The only ones not acting in good faith are your dear friends, the NDP. This was, I mean, listen, you said in the same breath, basically in the same sentence, that they got everything they wanted out of the deal. So this isn't about, you did. And it really is about the things that have been accomplished. But, you know, David, you asked Brad the question, if they got everything they want, why are they backing out? And the point is because you can get everything you want, but if you're not getting credit for it, it's not worth getting. This is extremely political, of course, but this doesn't mean that the NDP are marching Canadians toward an election. This is really about setting up a runway to distinguish and differentiate themselves from the Liberals, because the Liberals are the ones who are getting credit for pharmacare and dental care and school programs and things that the NDP have been concerned about and were part of the supply agreement, things that the Liberals held up on their end of the bargain. But this wasn't surprising to me at all in terms of timing. The NDP have really struggled. They've struggled in the polls. They've struggled really to carve out a frame, a narrative for themselves. Singh in particular has struggled. They have to now find a way to create space and movement outside of the Liberals and to create a new narrative for themselves. So it makes perfect sense to me that they've set up this runway to do this to the next election.
Well, Tim, the only ones not struggling right now are the Conservatives, right? I mean, neither partner in this supply and confidence agreement is doing particularly well in public opinion. And now they're going to chart their own path and go their own way with the time they have available to them. Where do you think this is?
Well, first of all, it is kind of funny that Jagmeet Singh stole Justin Trudeau's lunch money. I mean, here Justin Trudeau's making a school announcement about food and money.
Totally.
And Jagmeet Singh goes in and steals his lunch money. So that in and of itself is sort of ironic. But look, David, I'm no Dr. Phil nor Oprah, but to simplify what my friends have said, this was a strategic romantic breakup. Why was it time to break up? Well, because somebody else wanted to start playing the field, and that's Mr. Singh. He wants to get out from under the albatross that at least public opinion polling says is Mr. Trudeau and how people dislike him. He wants to put himself back on the market, and you can't blame him for that. He does want to try and create the sense that he's a better alternative, somebody else to take to the dance than the guy he's been dancing with for the last 2 years. I think, though, we haven't talked about this, and Brad probably would know better than the rest of us. I wonder, too, in terms of the timing, how much the by-election in Manitoba is influencing this. Different reports suggest it's close. I think it would be very tough for the NDP to lose a seat that the Blakey family has held.
They're worried about it,
for a long time. Again, Brad would know better, but my understanding, I do have one or two NDP friends, is at the door, there is a lot of pushback on this arrangement and this relationship.
Yeah.
So if you're going to pull the trigger and you were planning to do it in the fall, you may as well do it now before you potentially lose a seat to the Conservatives who you don't want to lose a seat to.
You know, Benzie, to continue Tim's breakup analogy, his Dear John letter said, "It's not me, it's you," right? I mean, you know, you're too weak, you're too selfish, you're too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. He suggests, and Mary Shortall, when I spoke to her, they want price capping as a policy, which is an interesting thing in 2024. What did you make of this departure missive?
Zap, you're frozen. Remember back in the 70s? That didn't work out so great. You know, it's interesting. Timing is everything in politics, David, and in life. And I think that Pierre Poilievre's timing was perfect. He does his sellout Singh letter last week, gets a lot of attention for that, holds a news conference on Parliament Hill, and then a few, not even a full week later, lo and behold, this video emerges on the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, and it's just, the whole thing is very odd the way that it rolled out. I personally don't think that we're going to have an election imminently. I don't think the New Democrats are ready for an election. That video, the production of that video suggests they're not ready. The lighting was dreadful, and and the sound quality wasn't great. It seemed hurried, even though the New Democrats insist that they actually did tape it before Mr. Poilievre's poison pen letter last week. Now, but Poilievre is the one getting credit. But this is one of these weird days, David, where it seems to me that all three leaders and all three parties can find a positive in this. There's something spinnable for everyone, as Amanda and Tim and Brad are proving. Because if you're Justin Trudeau actually looked oddly relieved today. Now maybe he just loves being in Newfoundland. It's a great place to visit. But he had a kind of lightness about him, almost as if he doesn't have Jagmeet Singh breathing down his neck. Singh, whenever that Hezbollah hostage video was shot, whether it was last week or this week, we don't know. But he looks happy because he's freed of the shackles of this albatross that is Justin Trudeau. And then, of course, Pierre Poilievre was cracking jokes at his scrum in British Columbia, and he looked almost. I think I was talking to some of his folks today. I think they were a little surprised at how quickly this happened. Now, and I think I agree with Tim. I think this has a lot to do with by-election politics, not just in Winnipeg, but also in the Montreal by-election. The New Democrats believe they can win that seat, David Lamette's former seat, against the Liberals. The Liberal campaign there has had some challenges. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. But it's weird to me that you would make by-election politics on something which is, by-elections one day in 2 weeks' time. This is something that could really affect a lot of people's futures.
But, Brad, the follow-through, I guess, is what we need to see now, right? Like, you've ended the supply and confidence agreement, so you criticize the government, how can you keep voting for him questions, those are over. But Pierre Poilievre's going to put a confidence motion in there somehow, some way, as soon as possible. And when you say they're too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people, you're speaking to the fundamental character of the government. How do you vote confidence in a government you've said this about after tearing up an agreement after 3 years of working with them, or 2.5 years of working with them?
Well, let's take a look at what those confidence motions may be between now and, let's say 12 months. We've got the fall economic statement will be tabled in the coming weeks. When we look at when that finally comes to a confidence vote, and I'm not making any predictions here, but the last one was just adopted in May. So we may not have a confidence motion until 2025, and I'm not making any predictions as to when Parliament will do that. Where I think things are going to get interesting is actually at the committee level. If you've been watching during CASA, Liberals and New Democrats have been seconding each other's motions. They've been shutting down Conservatives and Bloc when it suits their collective interest. One of the things I'll be looking for when the House does come back in a couple of weeks is what does this mean for committee? How quickly will legislation get through, or will it all get jammed up? Because I think the Liberals have, we've got a lot of sitting days, and there's a lot of legislation to get through. So that'll be one thing. Just want to go back quickly on the by-election.
Yep, quick.
I do not believe. First of all, like Elmwood-Transcona. Strong. It's it's a great North Winnipeg seat. The New Democrats have held it for most of the since the Depression, most of the years. But let's not forget the Conservatives have also held it. In between the Blakey, Daniel and Bill's era as well. It's been competitive, even though the NDP have won it more than not. I don't believe that this supply and confidence agreement was ripped up for one by-election. New Democrat, all parties have lost by-elections in the year before an election. I remember Winnipeg North losing that in 2010.
Sure.
And in 2011, we won 103 seats. So I really, it's fun to kind of joke, it's all about one by-election. I honestly don't believe that that's the case. If they rip it up and the NDP win, you can say, wasn't that smart? If they lose it, they say, well, you should have pulled out earlier. I believe that there is way more disentangling the party from this agreement than one by-election. And to be honest with you, I think the by-election in LaSalle-Mard-Verdun is between the NDP and the Bloc right now.
I think it's a three-way thing that's going to be pretty tight.
You think
and the gap between the Conservatives. No, I think the Liberals are competitive in LaSalle-Mard-Verdun
Well, let's on Monday night on the 16th. Tuesday morning we'll debrief on it. The bottom line is these are significant undertakings, and I don't think it's calculated over one by-election or Western provincial elections.
No, but Amanda, I think there are factions of the NDP caucus, the party, the movement that wanted this over and done with for all the reasons Brad has outlined about pivoting and differentiating. But what do you think this means about the possibility of an earlier election than October 2025, Amanda? Because if I'm a mischievous Conservative staffer, I'm finding a way to get a confidence vote that the House votes non-confidence in the Liberal government because they're too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people, and see how the NDP vote on that.
Well, for sure. I mean, the only ones who want an early election right now is the Conservative Party. The NDP doesn't benefit from having an early election right now. They're at 17% in the polls. They've pushed through policy. There seem to be a mouthpiece for the Liberals. They've pushed through policies that the Liberals are going to get credit for. This is not the time for them to go to the polls. And I think they believe that this is an opportunity for Singh to finally carve out his own sort of identity amongst these leaders and to be able to take on Poilievre directly, as opposed to be seen, again, as a bit of a mouthpiece. So I think that we could find ourselves in an early election, but it's not going to be that much earlier. The NDP requires more time to fundraise. They require more time to decide what are they going to stand for, how are they going to differentiate, and frankly, they need to see those poll numbers come up.
Yeah, and Tim, with Saskatchewan and British Columbia elections this fall, and the NDP kind of in play there in government in British Columbia, it's tough for them to do anything this fall. But I get the need for Jagmeet Singh and the NDP to differentiate themselves from the Liberals, but this will be Jagmeet Singh's third election campaign as a national leader. He's not an unknown quantity to Canadians, right?
Yeah, but I don't want to shock people. I read books every now and then. There's an author on this panel who wrote something about 2011 election. I think Mr. Layton, going into that election, Brad had three, if a similar number.
Right.
And Mr. Layton, though differently structured with Mr. Martin early on in the day, and then in the arrangement, the so-called coalition with Mr. Dion and Mr. Duceppe, found a way to become the catch-all for disaffected Liberals who couldn't vote for Michael Ignatieff. That's what Jagmeet Singh is trying to do here. The challenge, though, I think is more significant and has nothing to do with the three elections. It's more the potency of the brand of the CASA agreement. I think they championed that as an effective way to make Parliament work, and you can argue, as Brad has, that it has for them. But the Liberals are wonderful at stealing and taking political messages. No other way would they steal anything, of course, Amanda. And they went. I mean, we saw this last week. In Newfoundland last week, you had Joanne Thompson, the MP for St. John's East. 500,000 people now signed up for the program. All across the country, the Liberals were doing that, and they were getting more credit because there's more of them to do that. So the challenge Mr. Singh has is to put himself in that Layton-esque position and do it in a way where he can also reestablish his credibility. I think Brad would agree. Mr. Singh personally maybe has not lost credibility, but as a leader of a party with its own identity, he's lost some credibility. I don't think Mr. Layton ever lost that, and thus became a more natural receptor for disaffected Liberal votes.
But Benzie, Tim points to 2011, and Jack Layton had a tremendous breakthrough there, becoming the leader of the opposition, but it delivered a Conservative government, which is exactly what Jagmeet Singh says in his video he does not want to happen. Is he moving closer to maybe Prime Minister Poilievre with this move, if it does create instability and difficulty for the two progressive parties?
I mean, yes, I guess so, David, but I'm still not convinced that they will pull the trigger. I think this will be a classic minority government where they have to govern on a day-to-day basis, and it's going to be a lot more work for Karina Gould and the other House leaders. I think, Pierre Poilievre would want an election tomorrow if he could have one, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I'm still not convinced that it's till next year. The Democrats have a lot of organizational work they have to do. Amanda's right; the polling's not great. They're at 17. The Liberals are in the low 20s. So neither of those parties is particularly ready for an election. I think I don't blame Mr. Singh though for one big reason, David. The junior partner in these arrangements always fares poorly in the next election. We saw this in the United Kingdom. Nick Clegg, Liberal Democrats were crushed by David Cameron's Conservatives after spending 5 years in a coalition. Really, it wasn't a SACA.
Mr. Weaver out in British Columbia, right? When Horgan went early and got his majority. Yeah,
same thing. And here in Ontario, David Peterson's Liberals won a huge majority after a 2-year 1985 to 1987 arrangement with Bob Ray's New Democrats. And now Ray came back and formed government 3 years later, but that was an exception, not the rule. Most of the time, the junior partner really gets pasted, and I think Mr. Singh is conscious of that. And I still think the rollout of this was really clumsy, given the timing of the letter from Poilievre last week, the way that it was done with this weird video. And not having anyone available really today. You had the president of the party on, but no MPs are allowed to talk to the media today. That's just bizarre. They just look. I mean, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a Liberal cabinet minister who wants to come on camera. So it's weird how they wouldn't want to be talking about something that is supposedly so great for the New Democrats.
Yeah, and look, we got Mary Shortall, Tim, because she's from St. John's. She's a Newfoundlander. She's in St. John's. I don't know if she's from there. But, Amanda, look, there's going to be a lot of drama this fall about confidence votes and the possibility of an election. It probably does still go into 2025. Do you think there's any way, though, that a budget could get through in this dynamic, or does the budget then become the opportunity for the Liberals to sort of try to frame what the inevitable campaign is about?
Of course, but I think, again, it'll come down to what the numbers look like at that point. I mean, there are so many factors at play right now, right? There's the American election and how that's going to impact, what the outcome of that will do for all of the parties. There's provincial elections that will also impact, and all of those things will be in the calculus of these parties as they consider their odds. They're going to look at the polls, they're going to look at their fundraising numbers, they're going to look at their readiness for an election, and that will play into whether or not this budget passes. But certainly, as everyone has reiterated, this is not the time. I did think, I'll make one last point, and I thought that Chrystia Freeland was actually very strong today because she was making that good news economic argument and kind of saying, listen, things are turning. The tides are turning here, right? We're seeing, inflation is down, interest rates are down. And what does that look like for Canadians? What does it look like in 12, 13 months? Well, it looks like good news. And you know who doesn't want good news right now? The Conservatives don't want good news. It's bad news for them that the economy is turning. So they're starting to make that argument as well. And I would agree. Poilievre wants to go today because his numbers look good and things have been tough for the Liberals. But again, he might be the only leader that is prepared, that has the money, that has the funds, that has the polls, and is ready to go. And I don't think he has a party that's going to support him.
Things may look better in 12 or 13 months, but it's the question of whether they can get to 12 or 13 months, right? With the absence of the partner. But Brad, I want to talk a little bit about the timing and the way this was done with the video. The Beaverton, which is quite a funny webpage. Jagmeet Singh asserts independence by doing exactly what Pierre Poilievre told him to, which is a joke, but a funny one. And no press conference today, no one allowed to speak. I know he's going to do some stuff tomorrow, and we think he's going to join us here on the show. What do you make of doing it this way? Because this is a pretty big decision to announce in a video on your socials.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's put to bed this notion that Pierre Poilievre puts out his thing, and all of a sudden the NDP do it. Yeah. Like, he's going to take credit for the sun coming up tomorrow morning. Let's put that as this was all. The first conversation was had, just as the summer was breaking. MPs went out, door knocked. Serious conversations were had within caucus. The direction was given to develop a game plan. The video was shot a week and a half ago. Poilievre got lucky by saying, sun, come up, and then the sun came up, and now he's taking credit for it. So let's put that. That's just ridiculous. Put that aside. The timing is to go into the Parliament, and so that the caucus retreat is in Montreal. The Democrats are meeting in Montreal next week. Again, where the by-election is, which is a smart strategic, whereas my friends over at the Liberal Party are having it in Nanaimo, BC. Now, Nanaimo, BC is a beautiful, beautiful part of the country, but there's not one Liberal elected on Vancouver Island as a member of Parliament. The BC Liberals have just wound themselves up, and there's no provincial Liberal Party in British Columbia anymore. Why they're having it in Nanaimo, I'll never know. There's not much. When Singh talks about the Liberals being weak, let's look at how crazy the idea is for them to have a caucus retreat in Nanaimo. In fact, I think this will be the most Liberals ever in Nanaimo, BC at one time.
Well, yeah, I mean, the governing parties, you try to sprinkle it around the country. I don't know.
We'll see how well that goes. But the bottom line is, go into Parliament with some momentum to say, we will look at what the Liberals are doing on a case-by-case basis when it comes to confidence motions. And Singh will be now, without the shackles of the CASA, to go after Trudeau when he's wrong and really pivot and start attacking Pierre Poilievre. Because all Pierre Poilievre was doing for the last couple of years was saying, wow, how could you be so ignorant as to hang on to an unpopular leader? Well, okay, so we've got the things. It's run its course. The confidence and supply agreement made sense. It's run its course. Yep. It's time to pivot and move on. And this is the perfect time to do so. And it's not just.
I got to pivot to Tim.
Ed Broadbent
you can write the second book about this. You can write a second book about it and make money. Yeah, look, the timing in some ways, yes, makes sense. Brad's polishing it up better than anybody perhaps could polish it all up. But it doesn't look as well thought out as it could have been, right? But I would say this again about breakups. Normally, they're not that good anyway. They end up being messy. But Mr. Singh has to go from a messy breakup to figuring out how he stands out on his own. That's going to be a hell of a lot harder than the mechanics of all of this today.
But, it's interesting, Tim, just to stick with you, that there was an attempt here to put the focus on Pierre Poilievre. And we talked about this on the show last night, the competing sort of Labor Day videos that came out between the Conservatives and the NDP. The NDP are calling him a liar, calling him a fraud. I mean, they're quoting other people, but they're putting it in there, an official campaign literature. It seems like, after sort of the coasting and the videos and the slogans, that they are now targeting him personally, in a way, trying to really put the bullseye on the Conservative
Well,
leader.
again, I think it goes back to the desire that the NDP have to want to put themselves in as the alternative. I think they're looking at the polls, not just their own, but they're looking at the Liberal polls and thinking that the backside is out of her for the Liberals, that they are sinking, and that the only way they are going to gain is to get as aggressive with Pierre Poilievre as he has been with them. I don't know if that's the right calculation, given the personality that's involved and the audience that the NDP are trying to connect with, who say they're very offended and put off by any of the way Mr. Poilievre communicates. But the NDP don't seem to be afraid to punch. What the hell else do they have to lose at this juncture, given the position they're in?
By the way, the expression is the arse is out of it. You've been on the mainland too long, saying backside.
Sorry, boys, I didn't want you to complain.
But, Rob, if you're a Liberal now, and you have, as Brad says, made the foolish mistake to go to Nanaimo for your caucus retreat, you were going to have a conversation about, is there a path back? Is your leader redeemable? Is he viable? And look ahead to the possible inflection point in LaSalle-Verdun, and that by-election. Now you've just found out you can't count on a smoothly operating parliament, smoothly operating committees. I mean, where does this leave you as a governing party that's been facing an endless series of sort of existential challenges over the past couple of months?
Well, I mean, sometimes a crisis like this galvanizes a party. And look, Mr. Trudeau does not face the kind of divisions that I would have thought he would have by now, given the polls that the state that they've been in for the last few years. And as someone who watched the Martin Chrétien war fairly close up, I'm surprised that party has shown a discipline that it sure didn't show back then. But I think maybe that's why Mr. Trudeau looks so relieved today, is that that the talk about, well, is it time to change leaders, which I personally still think they should do if they want to follow the Kamala Harris, Joe Biden example in the States and really reboot. But maybe there's no.
Well, they haven't won yet either, so we don't know where that one's going to go, right? Yeah.
Fair enough. But the polls moved though. So David, we know the polls moved, and we know that the signs on the flags don't say F the Liberals, they say F Trudeau, right? So, and you see them all over Ontario and rural parts of the country, and in urban parts of the country. And I think Poilievre has made it a referendum on Justin Trudeau. That by-election here in Toronto that I covered, at St. Paul's, that was a by-election that was a referendum on Justin Trudeau. It wasn't on the Liberal government. So I think, but having said all that, I actually think this is a reprieve for Justin Trudeau in many ways, because you can't have the indulgence of a leadership race right now. They can't have a contest when they could lose a confidence vote and be plunged into an election. It's almost like 1979 kind of vibes. Remember, Pierre Trudeau had said he was leaving, and then they were plunged into election before he could really leave. So he led them in and Joe Clark, his Conservatives were defeated. So it's just a very strange phenomenon.
Okay, Amanda, I want to give you the last word because I do want to ask you a little bit about the Prime Minister's response today, that he's kind of like, oh, we're just going to kind of keep going. Kind of hope the NDP, focuses on delivering and not about politics, when clearly politics is a massive part of this. Karina Gould said much the same thing. I spoke with Jenna Sudds, who's going to be on later in the show. Much the same thing. There are confidence votes on things like estimates and stuff that are coming up. So, there is going to be these moments of tension. I mean, how do you go forward right now? And what do you say to your caucus when they all get together next week?
Well, I don't think that much has. I mean, everything has changed, but not that much has changed, because for all the reasons that I've laid out, I don't think the NDP are going to trigger an election. So, they know on the things that really matter to the NDP, they're going to show up for, right? They understand that that's going to happen because the NDP would look ridiculous in front of their base if they didn't. And they know that they have the upside of the NDP just kind of dithering in the polls and having a leader that really hasn't broken through at all. Yes, he's been around for ages, but I don't know that all Canadians can really name him or point to him as a viable option for Prime Minister. I think he believes that he still has to make that case. I think the party believes that he still has to make that case, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. The one last thing that I'll say about this is that I actually do think, though, that the video was a good move today from a comm strategy without putting any members out in front of the media, because it requires media to cover the controlled message exactly the way they want it to be covered. And that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing this clip appear over and over again, as opposed to having an interview with a member who may, have a challenging interview, say the wrong thing, and then that suddenly becomes the message of the day. So I do think that the way that they've attacked this, while, not so great for the media, is probably really good for them, and they get a few days out of it.
Well, to quote the great political philosopher Brad Levine, it is time to pivot. We have to say goodbye to the Power Panel. Rob Benzie, Amanda Alvaro, Brad Levine, Tim Powers, thank you so much.